Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Movie Maniac Show. This is Kush, and we're just going to talk about Black Panther, the movie Annihilation, and just some other stuff that might be fun. I have Matt with me over Facebook, and we're just going to talk about fun stuff. So how do we want to start this?
You want to start with Black Panther first?
Yeah, let's talk about Black Panther. That actually makes more sense. I don't know. We talked a lot about it once the movie ended, and it was like a while back. But like the really interesting thing was that movie was actually really good. Like I really enjoyed it. Apart from the fact that like the people in the movie theater were kind of a pain in the ass, like immense pain in the ass at times.
Yeah, no, I get you. But yeah, I feel like it followed like the same general Marvel formula, but having waited some time, hearing other people's responses to it, I thought it was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people particularly praised like Michael B. Jordan's role as the enemy as being one of the most like iconic Marvel Cinematic Universe enemies.
No, it's definitely like Killmonger was like incredibly layered, and that's like as much fun as I have in like most Marvel movies. This was like something very different. Because he's kind of like I don't know. There's an element of like what's currently happening in the world that was impacting like his character in itself, and it was just like really cool. Like it wasn't just like I'm evil for being evil, but I'm like there's a reason behind the way that I am, and like that's an actual school of thought that's there. You know, to like overthrow what's in existence, like a sense of anarchist. Like an anarchist. Idea, I don't know, like philosophy, something like that.
Yeah, I kind of want to watch the world burn away. But with this character, one thing I found interesting was that whole idea that he wasn't really super evil. Like, yeah, that's what he wanted to do. Like, arm people, have him like fight everyone is kind of a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like his motives weren't like necessarily very evil. A lot of guys like, I want to destroy the world. Like, I think of Spider-Man: Homecoming with Vulture, whatever the guy's name was.
Yeah.
He was just trying to help his family, even though he got like progressively a lot more like evil and illegal and stuff.
Yeah, like.
But definitely, like, he was trying to help his community. Like, he's seen what he's gone through. Like, and he knows, like, Wakanda has all this power. It's like, why are we just like ignoring everyone else? Like, watching all this like slavery and all this like oppression happen. It's like a reasonable school of thought, I thought, and it was like. It's not really that bad, although he did go about it in a kind of somewhat evil way. Yeah,
it was like I guess like a villain through pain kind of thing, like watching all of these things that happen around him, watching all of the things that happen in history, and realizing that there was a way that this all could have been prevented had Wakanda not being like an isolationist country and just started to protect itself and no one else. Like, I guess it was like a valid criticism of the place that it was, and I think that's like one thing that also made the story itself is very straightforward. Like it's a classic superhero story. It's kind of like I don't know, like Rocky 3 or something like that. You know, like the villain gets. I think Rocky 3 was the one where like Rocky got his ass kicked, right? And then like he came back to face what was his name? Clubber Lang. Yeah, that was Rocky 3.
Okay.
I
was familiar with them.
Clubber, like, because I think like Clubber Lang like kicked his ass in the first fight, and then he had to like train with Apollo Creed, and we're going off track, but like it was basically like the traditional like I guess like you lose and then you got to build up again, or you like kind of die and then like you kind of come back and those kind of things. So the story wasn't like that complicated or anything like that, but like the context behind it was fascinating, and that's one of the reasons I actually like really enjoyed this movie. Whereas like I found Doctor Strange to be like extremely disappointing after the first 30 minutes, and Spider-Man: Homecoming was just kind of fun. Thor: Ragnarok was also kind of fun, but like this was one of those movies where I'm just like getting out of it. I'm like, this is something that you can like kind of think about, you can talk about. It was a big change from what Marvel did usually, and I'm glad that they kind of did that, because it was kind of getting boring, like watching Marvel do the same thing again and again and again.
Yeah, but the thing with that is they're so commercially viable. Mm-hmm. It's nice to them take like a sort of calculated risk like this, because I feel like there's definitely a certain point. Like there's been black superheroes, like we've seen Blade, like
exactly.
That, like, but like this one is like particularly so like just very like I guess like black would be the way to say it. it's like very proud of what it is, and like I feel like a lot of people would have thought like years past, possibly even now, this wouldn't be such a success, but like usually like black culture is so like forefront in like pop culture now and stuff.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not too surprised that it did very well, and it's good for Marvel to take a good stance and have this happen, and let like Ryan Coogler is an excellent director, direct it and have a great cast. Like I thought they did an excellent job with the casting and the directing. Even if it was like a Marvel movie at its core, it did a very good job of adding other elements to it.
It combined a lot of. At times there's like I kind of get like a loss of words because there's so many things in this movie that you can like go into different directions and talk about each of those things. Like you can talk about like addressing like philosophical ideas. That's one thing that's there in Black Panther. Addressing like foreign policy and like isolationism as opposed to like reaching out to other people. That's another thing that's addressed. Dealing with like overcoming your own obstacles or finding like your place and like kind of the return of the king kind of thing. That's also another thing in the story. So like there's a lot of things packed into this movie, but it doesn't feel like that. Like it felt rushed towards the end, but it doesn't feel like this movie doesn't know what it's trying to be, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I get that. Sometimes studio movie you go all the way through and you'll be kind of just like, where's the direction for this? Like I see kind of what they wanted to do, but they kind of lack that. I feel like it was very clear and straightforward what like the whole execution of it.
Also, I'm looking at Ryan Coogler's like movies. The guy it's amazing. Like he had Fruitvale Station like 5 years ago, and then he had Creed right after, and then Black Panther right after that. Like it's like the rise of the movies that he's done has been like exponential.
Yeah, I haven't seen Fruitvale, but that's his directorial debut, right?
Yeah, Fruitvale was his directorial debut. It was a really good movie. I think it came out 5 years back, 2013, and then 2 years later he did Creed, and then 3 years after that he did Black Panther. So it's like that's actually really amazing. Like he's 31, he's done 3 really really good movies, so he's 3 for 3 right now. Like yeah, I'm excited to see what he does next. Like that's really cool. But going back, like I don't know, was there anything else you wanted to talk about Black Panther in particular?
Trying to think, but nothing specifically about that. But going back to like Ryan Coogler and how Marvel like to tackle things. Like I feel like usually in general, with a good director, you're guaranteed a good movie. Like you can have a great actor in a movie, and it's poor directing and just be terrible. I can't think of anything off the top of my head at the moment, but I think of like Ant-Man with Edgar Wright. Like I think he's a great director.
Yeah.
And, like it definitely had the the cuts that we're used to seeing in some of this type of movies.
Yeah, like the Cornetto
trilogy. Good. Like I feel like sometimes when you think of like a controlling studio like Marvel or like Disney, that there's a lot more creative control over these. Like they want to use these like new upcoming directors, but they also want to be like very in control of this production. But this felt like you definitely had a lot more control, which is nice to see. I
mean, I think that also has to do with like it was barely connected to the larger Marvel universe. Like obviously they had the thing tied from Civil War that I think it was T'Chaka died in Civil War, and then they had it kind of tied in the post-credit scene. But apart from that, it was its own movie in the entire time. Like there was nothing else to it.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I think they allowed. I mean, that's one of the things that bothered me a little bit. Like Ant-Man could have been like this really weird movie, and it would have been really fun. But it ended up being a traditional like Marvel movie because they took Edgar Wright off of it and took out like the real quirkiness that was behind it. And they saw that like by letting Taika Waititi, who's also a very quirky director, do Thor Ragnarok, the movie ended up doing incredibly well, and they kind of like let him have his way. Like it became a kind of a trippy movie. It had a lot to do with like visualization and things like that, and a very different tone from like Thor 1, which is like a Shakespeare kind of thing because it was directed by Kenneth Branagh, and then Thor 2, which is just like, what on earth was going on in that movie? No one knows.
Yeah, I think I'm a little behind the whole Thor thing, but I heard Dark World wasn't great, but that Ragnarok went back, and because kind of like, I heard it was very funny, and it was like a more lighthearted, that didn't take itself as seriously, which I feel like a lot of problems when you see the DC movies. Sometimes they're a little too heavy, and I don't think that's always like the best case. I don't think like making a super lighthearted superhero movie is like the best idea, because I do think they're like in comics actually quite violent and like
Yeah.
you know, it's a little like stuff like that. So you want to see that, but also I don't think it would be too dark unless it's like very well done. Like I think Christopher Nolan's like really the only example of like a darker superhero movie that like really worked out.
I think that's also like the translation of tone from like every time I kind of watch I love I love DC Comics, so it's like I have a clear preference for them when it comes to the comics over Marvel, but there's like I don't know how to put this, but like there's a translation of what the tone was like in Watchmen that kind of goes over into the DC Cinematic Universe right now, or DC Extended Universe, whatever it's called. Like,
yeah, I could see that.
And Watchmen is a very different comic. It is in its own entire context and its own entire thing, as opposed to like what the comics are made of. I love serious movies. I love serious superhero movies. Nolan's Batman trilogy is still one of my favorite like movie trilogies in general. But there's like an element of like there needs to be a tonal shift between movies, and there needs to be something that sets it apart. And I feel like that's one of the things one of the reasons why there's like evident criticism about the DC Extended Universe, and like you can always see where it comes from. I don't think it's like it's nowhere close to like a flawless extended universe or anything like that. I don't think the movies are masterpieces or anything like that. I see what they're trying to go for, but there's these obvious flaws because their tones are inconsistent and their stories can be inconsistent at times. And I think but they're a lot riskier because they try to go for these like extremely dark movies that address like political issues, which is what Batman vs Superman was kind of trying to do.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, like one of the things that was kind of turning me off from like Marvel's movies was that they were just taking any kind of weight that was there in the movie and like kind of, you know, just being like, oh no, we need to take this aspect out and we need to take this aspect out and we need to go for the most safe route possible. And like when they did Guardians, that was an example of something where they took a risk and it paid off, but then they didn't continue doing that because then like they continued on with like Ant-Man, where they took off Edgar Wright, or Civil War, or like I think the biggest disappointment I had was like 2 years ago when Doctor Strange came out. The first 30 minutes we got to see that like, you know, this character was created for like a psychedelic effect, a very like trippy character because he has to do with like astral planes and things like that. But then they kind of just took all of that out to go for like a traditional like Marvel superhero movie, and that's what kind of like I just got so irritated towards the I think like 80% of the movie was done, and I was irritated like sitting in the movie theater because I'm like, I loved the first 30 minutes of the movie and then they took all of that out to make it more like, you know, like I guess orthodox.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think it's like we see DC, we're just trying to try more different things. It doesn't work out as well. And you see Marvel trying to be the same, but eventually people kind of, you know, wear out. Like I know I haven't been going to the movies as much. I heard a lot of like amazing things about Black Panther. That's why I went. But usually for Marvel movies, like the MCU movies, like I thought Logan was awesome. Unlike the MCU, but I think like that I was kind of trying to avoid them because I was like, I just read mediocre reviews every time, and it's like, do I want to spend money on that? Do I want to see the same thing happen again, like another origin story?
Exactly. Like, I mean, Logan was just something in its own like zone. I think like that. Fox is doing this thing where like they sometimes have like really bad superhero movies, and then they have times where they like take these massive risks and they actually pay them off because they took the risk with Deadpool. They're just like, we're gonna make a superhero movie that's R-rated for the massive audience. Like obviously R-rated superhero movies have been done before with like Kick-Ass and like other movies like that, but like this was just like, all right, we're actually gonna make this like a high budget R-rated movie that's still about a superhero, and it paid off so well that we actually got to see Logan, and like we got to see a really dark, a really like nihilistic movie about a superhero, and that was just incredible. And it's like, and like Logan's something that's gonna stick around. Like, you know, you'll forget about like these movies that are not that risky, even though they're good movies. You'll forget about like the non-risky movies, but Logan will stick around. Like it'll be part of a conversation like a few years down the road when they're talking about like, you know, what to do with the character of Wolverine or something like that, or what to do with like, do we want, you know, it could even be appeal to like an Obi-Wan movie. Now they could actually try out a nihilistic Obi-Wan movie where he has to deal with like being on a planet all by himself and why he aged like 50 years in the span of like 19.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll ever have an actual meaning for that, but yeah, it would be cool to see them take that. But I worry about, because the whole new Last Jedi, like, it still did very well, but it was a little, like, not poorly reviewed, but it had a lot of like backlash, like having critical praise, because it basically it was like another take on Return of the Empire, kind of. It had that similar mood, but it was a different thing. Rey wasn't, like a Skywalker, she was just a regular person, and like, you know, like things like that change up like the story of it.
Yeah.
People don't like that. I feel like that might encourage
I think
it might encourage them to not be as risky with the R-rated, although I think it's still a very successful brand, and like I think a lot of people will still go to see it.
I think there was also the aspect that people had so many of these like theories going around, and like there was so much work being put in by the fan base in itself. Like, and I think the backlash came from the fact that like they couldn't, kind of like see that on screen, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm gonna be stepping outside, so hopefully it stays connected. But
no, don't worry about it. Wait. And, wait, I completely forgot. What were we talking about?
We're talking about, Star Wars a bit, but I don't know if you wanted to pivot to, Annihilation now.
Yeah, we were talking about, like, really trippy aspect of, like, Doctor Strange. It's a good segue into Annihilation, which I mainly went for this movie because I love Ex Machina, and like, Alex Garland has done, like, these movies earlier, but he did Ex Machina, and then it's just like, alright, 4 years later, I'm gonna do Annihilation. The movie came out, and like we ended up, I had no idea what this movie was really about. I went in completely blind, and I feel like that was pretty amazing. Like, that movie was like a serious mindfuck at times, and I think like going in without any information, not watching, I think I maybe watched like one trailer, or I don't even know if I really watched the trailer. I think I watched the trailer after coming back from the movie.
Yeah, I think I saw a trailer, but I don't think it was like very like explanatory trailer. Like, I remember an article the day before, and like I know I liked Alex Garland. I liked what he did with Ex Machina. That was like the reason also why I was like, I want to see this movie.
Yeah.
And I always like these kind of like trippy sci-fi movies. They're very interesting because there's really no limitation. It's always like, oh, this like not like anything that happened, like magic, like anything that happened, but like with science, you're always like, oh, what if this like alien shit happens? I find the genre itself very interesting. But with this movie, I just find it very, like, polarizing. Like, I feel like a lot of people really like it, or just, like, very confused by it. Like, after watching it, I was like, I enjoyed that, but it was kind of like, I'm not sure what I enjoyed about it. Like, it was a great, like, production value, like, great acting and stuff. Mm-hmm. But, like, sometimes it's a little, like, it's a little confusing. At the end, like, I mean, obviously it's meant to be, like, make me think and stuff, but I feel like the end is kind of just, like, after I wasn't really sure how to feel about the whole movie or like what its direction was.
So, did you like? There was a movie called like Sunshine by Danny Boyle. I think it's like 10 years old now. And right now, while listening to you talk about how the movie kind of played out, it just reminded me a lot about Sunshine, where like there's this heavy element of like you don't know what's quite going on, like there's just these twists and turns thrown at you, but you slowly start figuring out what's going on as like they kind of give you this exposition, and then the ending just does not make it like a lot of sense in a way.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, okay, go ahead.
No, that was basically it. Like that's what I kind of felt with like Annihilation as well. Like I'm not saying that the ending didn't make any sense, but I think for the timeline, or the fact that I think Annihilation is a part of like 3 books or something like that, and I think that like affects the movie in itself, because I don't know, I didn't see this movie like be set up for like a sequel or anything like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean that's true. It's nice to see when they're not like trying to set it up for something, but they make sequels out of literally anything.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I like confusing it for the sake of just like, I feel like it's more confusing for the sake of like it wasn't clear.
Mm-hmm.
Like what it was trying to be at the end, like everything built up to the. I feel like the build up was like a little spooky, definitely, but I think it was a little like maybe anticlimactic. Like I wasn't expecting a big battle or anything, but like I think that did build in like a lot of nice anticipation to the end.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of like a movie where it was just like legitimately confusing, but it was like well done the way it's like, supposed to be orientating. I can't think of it right now.
I mean, I guess like Memento's like going all the way back. It's kind of a movie that like you're not really sure as to what's going on, but that's
a good example because it's like backwards. You're trying to figure out what's going on. And
exactly. It's like scene by scene where like the movie's kind of playing with linear storytelling a lot, and
yeah,
and like it kind of just like fucks with you while the movie's going on, but like later on, it kind of ties in well together towards the end of the movie. And it doesn't feel rushed. I think the main thing was like the end of the movie just happened so quickly. For a movie that was very slow, it took its time throughout the entire thing. It took its time explaining the entire like the refraction of the DNA and how it's changing people from the inside, and how like the modifications on the DNA are affecting the way that, like, their body operates on what frequency and things like that.
Yeah.
But then, like, towards the end of the movie, it just, like, gave up on everything, and it kind of went that, like, 2001 A Space Odyssey route, where, at the end of the movie, you're kind of just, like, watching, like, colors for, like, I don't know, what was it, like, 5-6 minutes?
Oh, yeah.
And it didn't go, like, that trippy, it didn't go all the way to that extent, but it kind of just, like, it played heavily on that element of, like, no dialogue, and then, like, kind of seeing her get encapsulated by this, like, floating cloud kind of thing. So...
Yeah.
Like, I really enjoyed the movie, and I like the fact that it wasn't like a traditional movie, but I do feel like as much as there was setup, the payoff wasn't that good.
Yeah, I agree, and we're not caring about spoilers here, right?
No, like, I don't know if I should... Yeah, we're just talking about the movies, like, fuck the spoilers, that's fine.
So go ahead with them?
Yeah, go ahead with them. That was really confusing.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the spoiler stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so basically the ending, like, he's like she comes back, she's hugging her not husband,
Yeah.
and, like, there's people with their eyes have that little shimmer. Like, I know my roommate was saying, he saw it, like, the day after, like, he's saying, oh, she didn't make it out, like, the other thing did, and I don't entirely believe that was true. But I'm wondering, did the thing, like, just, that was in her, like, just take over and become a person? Is that what they were saying? Like...
I think it might have to do with, like, because so the, like, I guess the alien version of her husband, right? He got sick because he probably came back to, like, a traditional Earth setting, and he was, like, trying to fit in with that. And then once the I guess the shimmer went away, he was back alive, like, he was fine. And I feel like it's just like both of them have, like, refracted DNA that makes them different from, like, normal humans, but they're both alive. And I think that's basically what it was. I think it was just telling us that Natalie Portman's character has just, like, she's not, like, just human, she's, like, a mutated human now.
Okay.
Like,
I know they plan that whole, like, their relationship's kind of falling apart. Like, why would you do a mission that's basically suicidal, even though they seem to have, like, a good marriage?
Yeah, like,
so,
the entire movie had a lot to do with, like, self-destruction as well. Like, I think that was, like, a good, like, psychological play, because every single one of the major characters that goes into the shimmer is flawed in some way, or has, like, some kind of an issue in their life. Like, one of them's dying of cancer, the other one's, like, dealing with, like, other issues. So it was just, like, it showed us, like, a side of, like, alright, flawed heroes kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you think possibly it could be saying that in the end, like, they realized they had with each other, or that they didn't want to destroy themselves, or something like that? Or is that just looking at it too superficially? Like, I don't know. Everyone wants to try to justify, like, explain it, but, like for any movie, even if some are unexplainable.
I actually, like, I don't know, I didn't really think about that, like, I know, like, the characters are introduced as these, like, kind of flawed characters, but I don't know what happens in terms of once the shimmer's gone, like, what exactly is the deal over there. I didn't really think about it like that. I don't even know if, like, they kind of, like, oh, we're getting back together or something like that. Like, cause
it's more just like I think they understood each other. Like, they were, like, they knew why each side did it, but they did.
Like, I think the Embrace was just like a way of showing that, like, oh, look, her eyes are also shimmering right now, much like, you know, the alien version of her husband is, or something like that, and like kind of just show that, oh, both of them are like have mutated DNA right now, and they're not like regular humans anymore, or something like that. Like that's the thing, like, because I think this movie's like this movie is based off, the movie's based off of a novel, and the novel is 3 books. So like Annihilation, I think, is just the first one, and then there's 2 more books, and I feel like that's why there's so many questions that we haven't like really figured out. But I don't know if this movie's gonna have a sequel or not, or anything like that. Like, I don't know if they're trying to do like a trilogy kind of thing.
Yeah, because I think of it like, what is it? It's like a little different. Like Blade Runner, they based off like a novel, but it's like basically a short story. Like, I don't know if there's like, I think there's probably more depth to it in the book. You're kind of limited to what you can show, but yeah, I think maybe it's like harder to put it on the screen because it's definitely a very complicated movie.
I think this movie would have been if they'd like kind of translated that story and gone like even more in depth and everything like that. I think it would have been great as a TV show, like a miniseries or something like that, like something along the lines of Westworld or something like that. I think it would have been really interesting to see this happen in those terms. That way, there would be more of like an explanation, and you understand it more.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I mean, the thing is, you don't see many sci-fi, mini-series. I'm trying to think of like one off the top of my head, but I mean, I really can't. Most of them are like kind of like a drama, like type of that. Like, I think of like True Detective or like.
But like, won't something like, okay, I mean, Westworld is technically like a season-based show, but. No, you're kind of right. Like, they've kind of done it with like smaller versions, with like Battlestar Galactica having like a small sci-fi miniseries, I think, and then I think they also had one with like Halo for like 6 or 7 episodes, but both of them are like, you know, they were pretty like low budget, and they were kind of bad.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of still a niche genre, I think. Even if they're like big things like Star Wars, still feel like in general it's like it's very top heavy.
Yeah.
For sci-fi. But how'd you feel about the rest of the story, like the acting, the character development? Do you feel like that was up to par? Something like maybe Ex Machina.
I thought the acting was incredibly good. Like, the acting in this movie was not as, I guess, nuanced as it was in Ex Machina, but Ex Machina was also much smaller of a film. Like, the entire movie takes place in, like, one house, and it's just 3 characters, as opposed to this one where it's like, oh, like, you know, look at all, like, the beautiful stuff that's happening and things like that, because this was a much more of a nature-esque film, whereas the other one was, like, a mixture of, like, you know, technophobia, seeing where technology can take us, at what point does AI become humans. It was like kind of dealing with more philosophical stuff, whereas this one was like more dealing with philosophical stuff and psychological stuff, but it was also like throwing these like incredible gorgeous landscapes at you. So
very visual.
It was a very visual movie. Like, I'd say the acting was definitely better in Ex Machina, but it's also because like the movie was entirely running off of the acting, because there was nothing else for you to look at. And
also, I feel like the sound. I heard like reading before.
Mm-hmm.
The sound's a big thing, and I wouldn't say it's as big as like when I think of sound, I think of Dunkirk, or I think
exactly.
of
Yeah.
Blade Runner. That the soundtrack was basically like the movie had a lot of depth otherwise, but
like
that's a big part of it.
This movie had a lot of motifs where in particular scenes or particular places you would hear that like one particular sound. But no, if I wouldn't say like that. I don't know if this movie has like a soundtrack per se. Like, like you said, like Dunkirk, the entire movie was just like this sound made that experience. Like Hans Zimmer's score was one of the reasons why you felt all of the things that you felt while watching Dunkirk, and like the way that sound editing was done and the way the sound mixing was done as well. And I think they ended up winning Oscars for both of them.
Yeah. Also, another thing about this movie was, what did you think about? I was just thinking about that right now. The whole tree people thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know that one girl obviously turns into a literal tree.
That was just so weird. It like happened so fast.
Yeah, like literally immediately, like compared. But so basically, what it's saying, everyone else that was shaped a tree, he was also a person that just gave in, basically.
I think so. Like I feel like that's what it, because they were trying to take us off that route and say that like, oh no, this is just like, you know, the DNA of these plants has been modified to the point where like their structure comes off more humanoid. But then like I think it was Tessa Thompson's character, she just like turns into one of these plants. So it's like they have two explanations and they never really like give any form of closure. So I think you can go off of maybe both of them are true, maybe just one of them is true. Like I have no idea how to like really address that. Like that's the thing coming out of the movie. Like when there's questions about it, it's like I don't really know what the answer is to these things.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know if he's trying to go for one or not, because I'm not as familiar with him publicly. I know there's people like David Lynch that either don't disclose what their ideas were or just don't even like have like a very concrete explanation. Like sometimes it's kind of like, why is this so weird? It's like, I don't have an explanation. That's just what it is.
Yeah.
Like this director, I don't know. I mean, I feel like if you just see Ex Machina, it's definitely very literal.
Mm-hmm.
But this one's kind of tougher to tell or like read the symbols as much.
Yeah.
I feel like one thing definitely is noticeable was that it gave everyone what they want. It's kind of like everyone's looking for something like a release, an escape, you know. Maybe not the girl that got ripped apart by a bear. That's probably not what she wanted, but like, like that girl, like, oh, like, because they even explicitly said it, like, oh, you just want to get there. Like the other girl wants to destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
Natalie Portman's character, the other woman just wants to make it because she has cancer.
Yeah.
The other girl just didn't even care. She's like, I don't even care. Like, I just want to go. Like, and then she just turned to a plan.
Like,
so I mean,
I think the movie like grabbed my attention throughout the thing. I'm gonna give it props for that. Like the storytelling like weirded me out at times, and I don't know if that was the point of it. I feel like there were a lot of loose ends that were never addressed, and I don't know if that was also the kind of, you know, the thing that Alex Garland was trying to go for. But the movie definitely like grabbed my attention from the first moment, and then like it never really let go. It had a feel like similar to Arrival at times, but Arrival was much more of a complete movie than this was.
Oh, Arrival! I haven't seen that yet.
That's one movie that I would highly recommend. I think like a lot of people thought that Annihilation was going to be very similar to Arrival, and that was one of the things that got people to go for it if they didn't know who Alex Garland was, who itself is like a great writer and a great director. And like that's that conversation we had while coming out. It was like, what, like every time someone writes a script, something triggers that script, and it's like, what exactly makes you think of something like this?
Yeah, that's
like,
definitely true.
Like the story is so obscure that it's just like I can understand like an element of like going into the nature and being one with the nature, but then like it just delves into this entire thing, and it was just kind of a weird movie. Like I'd still say that like, you know, both of those movies need to be watched. Like both Black Panther and Annihilation are definitely movies that people should watch, but like Annihilation is kind of like a, I guess the best way to put it is like an acquired taste if you don't want to walk out of that movie.
Yeah, you gotta come in with different expectations for both. It's not something you really just watch lightly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's also tougher to tell us motivation because, I mean, obviously a director has control over what they want to express.
Yeah.
Like usually when it has some of the source material, it's kind of, you know, they're at the mercy of what the writer wanted to show from it.
Yeah.
To gather that and put it in their own words of what they want to show. So, I mean, it's not only him that has to explain it, but maybe the author. Although I'm sure his input, the director, is also like very like influential to what the movie is supposed to say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's, yeah, like it was definitely like I don't think Annihilation had like a lot of I guess like studio meddling or anything like that. This movie seems very much like it's like a director and a writer's like production. Like the people who were in charge of like coming up with the script and the people that were in charge of the shooting of it basically just created this entire film. So it's definitely like an artistic thing. But
yeah,
like in a year when I watched like, I don't know, for me like the peak of sci-fi last year into this year was Blade Runner 2049. Like
I think so. Was big, but yeah, it definitely was a good one.
Like I love Star Wars, and like everyone knows how much I love Star Wars, but like Blade Runner stole the year for me. I think it was like one of my favorite. It probably was my favorite film of the year as well. I wouldn't be surprised by that. And like yeah, in a year when like they're able to do like something complicated and still throw twists at you, which they did in Blade Runner, in like a more complete version of a story. Like Annihilation was extremely interesting, but I don't know, like it kind of like it was weird towards the end, and it just bothered me that like I didn't come out like completely satisfied from the movie, but I rather came out with like a lot of questions that I knew that I couldn't find any answers to.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the thing with Blade Runner, even with the original, is that it's such an intriguing world they built around it. Like, it's based on a short story, but it's also like the world, like the visualization, like the neon lights, everything. It's just very intriguing, I think. And it's like, you want to dive into that, which I find in movies like that, or like John Wick, where they're like not necessarily like deep movies, but they have like a very like unexplained background story, or like Alien, where it's like they touch on it, they don't like explain it. There's like a ton of like pre-established history to it. It's what makes the Game of Thrones so great, that even though the story is a great story, it's that there's so much history that's built that's not like explained in the show.
Exactly.
You can keep reading it, and you'll just learn so much more about this like completely unique world.
Like if you just watched I don't know, yeah, if you just like watched Game of Thrones and you literally did not read anything else about it, like no storyline, nothing on the internet and things like that, I feel like you would be very confused by that show. But it's the fact that like there's access to all of this information that can kind of give you a more complete feeling. It definitely makes a big difference. And I feel like maybe you can kind of do that with Annihilation by reading the book series, but like actually, yeah, you can kind of do that by reading the book series. So
yeah, I'm sure it'll help clarify some aspects of it.
Yeah, like that's definitely the case. Well, we went through 2 movies today, so that was pretty good. And like we went on a few rants, and that was kind of interesting as well. But like,
yeah, it's to be expected.
It's to be expected. Like this was just like very off the cuff, and I don't know. That's basically all I have for today. Do you have anything else?
Not really. I mean, unless I don't know if you watched the Oscars at all. I mean, I know about like 2 of them. Like I've heard a few Oscars won, but I know Jordan Peele winning was the best original screenplay, and I know Best Picture was Shape of Water.
That's like all of my updates basically came from like I think like towards the end of the Oscars, I just typed in Oscars 2018 on Google and I kind of just like went through who won the awards. Because like I think I watched like 6 out of the 9 movies that were nominated for Best Picture, so I didn't even really watch that many. Like there's I didn't watch like 3 Billboards. I didn't watch let's see, I'm taking a look at it right now.
Shape of Water.
Yeah, I still have to watch Shape of Water as well. I
remember was getting super hyped, and I just didn't see it. Now it's like Best Picture, and like I don't love Guillermo del Toro movies. Like I like them and I appreciate them, but I don't love them. But yeah. I definitely am intrigued to see it. Like usually these Best Picture movies are pretty solid. Even like I'm not saying this year because I haven't seen a lot of them this year, but like sometimes I feel like other movies deserve it more. But like I mean, I'm sure it's a very well done movie. Like I always like respect their decision for the most part.
I mean, yeah, like I'm definitely there's certain movies that I feel like I really wanted to see get nominated that never got nominated this year. Like I was extremely like I don't know, I was like pretty dissatisfied that Logan didn't get any love this year at all.
Yeah, it's a little surprising. I thought they might have gotten like a nomination. I know they expanded the nominations like 5 to 10 or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a little unfortunate.
Like I know I think it got a nomination for like a Best Adapted Screenplay from I'm guessing that they probably linked it to Old Man Logan, but like that movie was the payoff for that movie, like the fact that like you know this he's been Wolverine for like almost 18 years, and the payoff like while watching Logan, it was just amazing. And I was like pretty disappointed that like he didn't get like an acting bid, but like the movie wasn't even really considered for anything at all.
Yeah, there's only a stigma against those type of movies like that, like horror, comedy usually gets not really into that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like it's because drama is such a prestige thing and it requires so much emotional level. But it's still, I feel like there's definitely like a lot. Like even though I think like John Wick 2, which was probably one of my favorite movies came out last year.
Yeah.
It's I don't love like the stupid shoot 'em up action movies. I feel like this one's just such a well executed movie. It's like you go to the theater, you're gonna have a ton of fun seeing it. Like I think that's like an important part of it as well. But I couldn't see John Wick 2 being nominated for Best Picture. But Logan definitely had that like prestige aura to it almost.
I think it was an incredibly well acted movie. Like I don't know. I couldn't think of like someone in the movie who like acted bad. Like the girl who was playing like Laura slash X-23, I guess, did a really good job for like just a small like 10-year-old kid.
Yeah, these kid actors have gotten better and better. It's impressive.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
Movies are so bad. Then it's like now it's like they're like legitimate actors. But I mean, there's so much I guess schooling now, and it's a more established business that these kids like. I think Stranger Things, like these kids are actually like really talented like actors.
They just have a lot of like artistic integrity and like creativity as well. And like yeah, you're right. Like you watch like movies from the 80s and like early 90s and things like that. Kid actors used to be really bad, and they would throw you off from the movie. But like watching Logan, like her kid version, or not the kid version, but like the character of Laura was really well played. Patrick Stewart did an incredible job as like Xavier. There were parts of the movie where you actually got emotional just watching him do he like kind of became less Patrick Stewart, and he's kind of always done this, but like especially in Logan, he wasn't coming off as Patrick Stewart. He was coming off as his name is Patrick Stewart, right? Yeah.
Sir Patrick Stewart.
Sir Patrick Stewart. But like he was coming off less and less as Patrick Stewart and as Sir Patrick Stewart, and he was coming off more and more as like as Xavier, and he kind of like became that character.
Yeah, he did a good job emotionally transforming from like this like decrepit old man who's kind of just gone crazy until being not really crazy, just kind of defeated and resigned to seeing the hope with Laura.
Yeah, and like. He was dealing with a lot of guilt, which we find out as like the movie goes on. But like I genuinely feel like the acting was fantastic in that movie, and I'm just disappointed that like the movie got like no love at all. And I think it was a similar thing with like Best Director in a way. I mean it was pretty good, but like I don't know. If it was up to me, I might have replaced Paul Thomas Anderson for Phantom Thread by like bringing in Patty Jenkins for Wonder Woman. Like I've rewatched particular scenes from that movie so many times, and the way that like she directed the movie, and like watching the movie in the cinema itself, like I don't know. It's like what you kind of go to movie theaters for. Like
yeah, I get that. Yeah, he did a pretty good job. They had a female lead. It was female directed. Yeah, it seems like they did I like that movie a lot too. I mean, it was a long movie, but like you don't really notice it when you're like enjoying something that much.
Exactly, and like I feel like she definitely deserved some kind of a nod, and yeah, like there's like it's a little annoying that like there is a saturation level to superhero movies, but like I feel like good superhero movies should get recognized because at the end of it they end up becoming really good movies as well. They're not just superhero movies; they're movies in itself.
Yeah, because it definitely changes everything up itself. Because I know they were saying like read articles about the Oscars, their ratings declined because they only have like 5 nominations. They open it up to 10. Then there's too much. You're nominating random movies. Try to find a balance, but I think definitely movies like Logan or possibly Wonder Woman, just like even a nomination for Best Picture, would definitely hype them up, and would also potentially inspire these companies to like make more prestige films because they realize they could be up for an Oscar or something. The industry possibly.
I think it also has like one of the things that I feel like the one of the main reasons why the ratings were probably really bad this year is like I'm looking at the Best Picture nominees. Most of these movies came out very, very close to the end of last year or the start of I think it was very close to the end of last year, and some of these movies were like limited release, so they weren't even for the entire audience. Like you would have to travel for a long distance, like far out in order to go see these movies.
Yeah, like 3 Billboards I heard about like last month. Like I didn't realize it was being like a movie. Like I was kind of confused by that.
Exactly, like
it's like a lot of these like prestige time, like because a lot of those come at the end of the year too, because then it's like fresh in everyone's mind.
Like so,
time to release an Oscar movie.
I think 3 Billboards like none of these movies were like particular like massive box office successes or anything. Like okay, not none of them, but only some of them were massive box office successes. Only some of them were watched by the general like movie going audience. Whereas like the rest of the movies were kind of like very much based around like the people that vote on these things. If that makes sense. Like the screeners went out for 3 Billboards. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Like I think the movie was like basically pre-release, and the screeners went out, and the movie got nominated before like the general population even got to see the movie.
Yeah, I think it makes sense definitely.
So like it's just like people aren't even going to be that invested if they have no idea what these movies are.
Yeah, I think it's their biggest problem, but it's also like these are very like I haven't seen 3 Billboards, I haven't seen Lady Bird or any of these other movies a lot of these other movies are nominated, but I'm sure they're all very solid movies. It's just like I don't think the average person's gonna go see 3 Billboards in a movie theater if it's even possible.
Yeah.
So that definitely limits like the appeal of it when there's movies like that. So they really have to find some sort of balance with that. I'm not saying about every movie. Another thing they were saying is like what if Deadpool made it? I don't think that was that this past year or the year before?
Deadpool was 2016, so I think it would have been the nomination for last year's Oscar.
Yeah, so they were saying like managing something like that. Like they say particularly superhero movies are so big now. But if you had to pick a movie from last year, what would you pick? Best Picture.
Okay, there's 2 movies that I would go for. If I had to pick a movie for Best Picture, the best movie-going experience I had was Dunkirk. By far, like, in multiple, like, I can't think of, like, a time... I think the only time I really remember having, like, this kind of an experience was probably, like, I remember watching Man of Steel for the very first time in a proper, like, IMAX theater, right?
Yeah.
And that's when, like, you're seeing, like, superheroes fly around and things like that. Like, it's incredible like that. Or something along the lines of Avatar. But, like, this movie, it was hard to get through the movie because of the fact, like, the sound would actually scare you. Like, legitimately scare you. And I think, like, it's just a really well-done movie. But it's a movie that, like, movies are... the reason why theaters were made was for movies like these. Otherwise, a lot of the movies, you can kind of just sit at home and watch them.
Yeah, I couldn't see that with Dunkirk. It would just lose the effect. It's just a nice sound system or like surround sound.
Exactly.
Half it is the sound effect.
Like as much as I enjoy these, like, I guess, like, movies that are purely acting based or acting driven, or like these, like, smaller movies where, like, I guess it's like, oh, let's have a movie completely based off conversations or something like that. I really do enjoy those movies. Like, I think, like, the Before Sunrise, Sunset, and Midnight series is, like, one of my favorite, like, romantic comedy or romantic movies ever made. But movies like Dunkirk, there's so much invested into them there's so much input into it that, like, the output needs to get recognized. And, like, I would say, like, last year, Dunkirk was a movie which I feel like I had the best movie-going experience I've ever had.
Yeah, I think it's definitely reasonable.
What would you say, like, for you?
I don't even know. I think I'd have to go with, honestly, John Wick 2. When I think of movies I saw last year, it wasn't like the most plot-heavy or anything.
Yeah.
I do feel like I enjoyed it the most. And following up John Wick 1, which I saw at my house, which I thought was just like, I think on my friends, like, we just, like, get caught off guard for a second because it's in the background, like, just watching it.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it had a lot to live up to, and I think it did. It expanded on, like, the background story from the first one. And I just thought, like, all the action scenes were incredible. Like, Keanu Reeves is awesome. Like, it's a very interesting all-around story and movie, and it just keeps you locked in because it's, like, it pays homage to, like, these old 80s action movies, but it's just seems like it's almost like a next step up. Where it's just a little impressive because it's just a shoot 'em up movie, but there's like more to it than just that. but there's not kind of, it's not, there's no super heavy plot, not a ton of character development, just like a cold-blooded killer who just has a vendetta.
Yeah, it's similar to like Taken in a way, where it kind of takes what was super famous like 20-30 years ago, like traditional revenge movies or something like that, and then kind of brings it back, but it brings back something new to it as well. And it's hard to do those things when you have like a decade of saturation of just these kind of movies.
Yeah, because I definitely think with that particular like 80s genre of straight up action, it really just got it was popular because it was just so cool, but eventually it just like burned out because it was just the same thing, and the acting wasn't great. It was just one-liners, dudes holding big guns. Like it just wasn't like particularly like innovative. But I feel like there's definitely it's a nice twist to see this, where it's a genre that I don't particularly love, but like seeing something that reaches out from a genre that I don't particularly follow, I think is very like impressive.
Okay, I'm just like going through the year of 2017 in terms of like the movies that came out. That's like I'd say the movies that stood out to me the most, or the ones that I've remembered, or like just the movies that I think I like the most overall. It would be like, let's see, Get Out, Dunkirk, Blade Runner 2049, Wonder Woman, Big Sick, Logan, and oh yeah, I completely forgot, War for the Planet of the Apes. That was last year.
Oh yeah, that was last year. And was Arrival last year too?
Arrival was 2 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Arrival was 2016 as well. Arrival was also a really good movie, but like it did get its recognition.
Yeah.
So yeah, like Get Out was like, I can't even remember if like I ended up watching it in the movie theater or if I ended up watching it at like home or something like that. But or like once it was on like some kind of I can't remember how I ended up watching the movie, but like I remember watching the movie and I'm like, I literally can't look away for this entire movie. Like you always have this tendency that when you're watching movies at home, like you can like go on your phone or do something like that, and I literally could not do that for the entire movie.
Yeah, I mean, with me, I find myself to be like super focused on watching something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I look away, I miss like like the smallest dialogue. Like I'll rewind back and catch it. And then like and nothing, or like sometimes you don't hear something properly, so I go back. But yeah, no, I saw it in the theater definitely. I want to watch it again, honestly, because I thought it was a very well done movie. Like the end kind of became like a just standard like beat the shit out of everyone like horror movie, which I didn't mind at all. I thought it was kind of like that whole like just lashing out revenge kind of. I like the whole. It's like with Black Panther. It's like that two-sided element to it. That it's like not just like a movie, a horror movie. It's like a black movie, and then it's like a legitimate fear that's like compounded. It's like imagine this, but it's like far more sinister and just like meeting some like white parents,
Like it was also like just at the end of it, like if you take everything out of it, it's still an incredible like just a thriller movie. Like it's just really well made from like a technical standpoint. And then you add in the fact that there's so much context behind this, it just like enhances how good of a film it was.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I mean, yes, even on its own, it's just well done. It's a classic theme. Things aren't what they seem movie, or it's like one of those like uncomfortable dinner party movies.
Like there were points of it when it's like really cringy or something like that. But then like that cringe element goes away when you realize there's a much more sinister aspect to it.
Yeah, I mean, and what is it? Wait, I forgot where I was going with this, but yeah, no, it's like slipped my mind. Yeah, also the comedy. That was like the comedy in it was just like a nice touch. What was that guy, Lil Ray, whatever?
Yeah.
Maybe. Like I've seen him popping up in a bunch of stuff in that new like Kyrie Irving movie. I thought he was really funny and like gave a nice break to the horror. Like the movies, like sometimes the horror comedies, they're just more funny and they're scary, or they're just not very funny.
Yeah.
Although most of them I've seen are usually in like a good balance. Like I think of like, was it Last House on the Left? Was that it, or The Cabin in the Woods? I think maybe it was.
Cabin in the Woods was the one where it kind of like played off of all of the traditional horror genres.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing. Like it's still like there's scary aspects, but it's also like comedy. I think it's definitely tough to balance two genres. I think it's a good break from the horror people who don't love horror.
Yeah.
But it's also still like I think Get Out is definitely a little creepy. Like going to the sunken place, like like kind of scary when you get like hypnotized and everything.
And it's like, obviously, like once the movie's been out and like you've heard the conversation behind it and everything like that, you kind of have the movie ruined a little bit for you. But if you go in without like going in to get out like without any information, that movie like really throws you in for a turn because you're not expecting any of the things that are thrown at you. And it's like it's hard.
Definitely.
It's hard to do that in a time when there's so many movies that are out there, like you can like almost predict what's happening in the movie, and you can't really do that while watching this movie if you go in without any information.
Yeah, and also, I mean, honestly, I think it's usually for lesser movies, but like trailers that reveals too much the plot.
Yeah.
I think it's more just for like lesser movies where it's like, oh, that's what it's about, so I know what I'm getting myself into. But like sometimes I think, like with Venom, like I'm sure I'll have a more like expanded trailer, but it's kind of like I don't know what's gonna happen. Like, what does Venom look like? Like, what the hell's actually going on? Like, I kind of think not to know. It's like it leaves you wanting more in a world that we're so exposed to everything. Like the episode of Game of Thrones released, there's about like 20 different fan theories, and like one was bound to be correct. So it's kind of just like, in a way, it's cool to like see people dissect things, but also in a way, it almost ruins things. So it is nice to go in kind of like without knowing as much.
I think that's like we also saw that happen with what was the Cloverfield Paradox, and while that movie was like okay,
yeah, that's one way to put it.
the movie was like kind of bad, but like the way that it gauged interest and the fact that you kind of go into the movie without you go in without any knowledge. And I really like that. I really like that, like doing that for Annihilation as well. And it's hard to do it in a time like this. Like, because you'll see trailers come out for movies like 11 months before they're coming out, and then you have like 4 other trailers that come out and like 13 different TV spots and things like that. And they're kind of obviously you can like not log in to your or not search it up and then kind of go in without any information. But it's always nice to see like these different kinds of things where like movies don't invest heavily into a marketing campaign, but like rather go like a kind of a different route.
Yeah, and that whole Cloverfield thing itself, though. I think of Cloverfield, I think like the original one, which I heard just talking about, there's a buzz about, but like I remember watching it and being like, this is okay.
Yeah.
The second one, like I liked how it was done with like, and I thought John Goodman was great in it. The whole John Goodman renaissance, him being in every movie.
Yeah.
I thought like that was like a particularly interesting theme where like I kind of didn't love the ending though. I like the whole idea that there was like nothing to fear but like other people. It was an interesting concept where it's like the girl's afraid there's like aliens, they can't breathe outside, but in reality you can.
Yeah.
But then there happens to also be aliens too, so it's like okay, it kind of does make sense for hiding. But yeah, definitely with the Cloverfield's particular thing is the viral marketing, and I think that definitely intrigued me. Also being a fan of the series, despite reading how terrible it was, or like just hearing about it, you're kind of like, no, I do like Cloverfield though, and you check it out. And I heard an interesting parallel that like in this movie, if you play it at the same time as the original, at the time they hear like the aliens attack or that shake in the apartment, that it's the same time. I think they teleport in the movie if you've seen it.
Okay.
There are some like really like Easter egg type things with that, but I mean, other than that, I don't think the movie really was particularly good in its own.
Like I've kind of. So I'd say from the series, like 10 Cloverfield Lane is probably my favorite because it's less of like the monster kind of thing, and it's just like a very good like human horror kind of film. Yeah, but like I'm not invested into like Cloverfield lore, so I didn't actually read anything about that, and that's actually really cool if they've like kind of tried to tie it in to the first movie. I know that they're trying to like make a full like universe out of this now, where they're trying to get like 4 or 5 different Cloverfield movies or something like that. So
yeah, that's what I've heard, and I think even with like this, which like Netflix kind of doing that whole like volume like over quality.
Yeah.
Some of them are better than others, but like that's kind of a hit or miss at their point because they're providing more off original content rather than just like taking other people's work, like someone like Hulu or someone that's their thing is like over TV, but not on demand kind of.
I think like Netflix also has like a really high burn rate or something like that because like their system is kind of like if you like it, then like the movie just gets made. Or I think it's
that whole South Park episode about it.
Yeah, and it's either that or it's like it's similar for their TV shows where it's just like if they like the pitch that you have, they just buy the rights and then you make the show for them. So
Yeah.
like I mean like that's a whole other conversation for a different time, but it's like it's also it's also like a really interesting thing in itself.
Yeah, no, I like the whole concept because it makes a lot of like, you know, artists don't necessarily get their movies made, get made. Then like I like seeing a lot of like amateur horror movies and stuff. That a lot of them are kind of the same found footage movie. So it's like there's a hit and miss. So the good aspect, you get more people who get more opportunities at the same time. We also get a lot of just like the same old crap.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I think that's gonna be all for today. That was.
All right.
Let's see. We went through Black Panther. We went through Annihilation. We went through the Oscars, and then we kind of also went through like 2017 in film. So I think that was a pretty good show. Like, there we go. First episode's done. See you guys.
Yeah, good start.